Good afternoon. Welcome to Community Matters. This is your host, Becky Steinbrunner. I'm honored to be here sharing this lovely stormy afternoon with you all. And you can be out there and anywhere in the world, but just know that here in Santa Cruz we've got some rain and pretty chilly weather. Good, interesting, unsettled weather. I really love it. So thank you for joining Community Matters. I will be here with you for a couple of hours. And our program today is going to be interesting and a bit unknown. I had a cancellation at the last minute and so have invited a couple of people to call in. One person that I invited to call in that may be calling in is Mr. Ilyea Buliach. He is a very actively involved person in the Watsonville area, and recently was on our program talking about some very odd things that the city of Watsonville has done to allow a private chartered school. This is SEBA charter school, and the Pajaro Valley School District has requested that large school of 500 be allowed to move out of the city of Watsonville and into a site on San Andreas Road, where there is an alternative high school known as Renaissance High, student population of about 200. So there were some very interesting things going on with that. And he now is also interested in working with issues in the city of Watsonville related to something that was reported in yesterday's Santa Cruz Sentinel on page 1, the micro-village project. A 34-unit temporary homeless shelter on the grounds of Westview Presbyterian Church. And there's some very interesting things behind that, and perhaps Mr. Buliach will call in at some point today with that. If not, we'll discuss it a bit on the air and see what you think. Another possible caller could be it's Tanya Rivera from Never Again Moss Landing. That's a group that has pulled together and is amazingly well organized, fighting the powers that be regarding the Vistra Moss Landing battery fire and literally the fallout from that, and trying to find out why no one is talking about it and providing information. So I just want to do my commercial here at the beginning so I don't forget, because I really do want you out there to know about the wonderful facility here where Santa Cruz Voice Studio is located, and that is at the Satellite Workspace and Digital Media Center at 325 Soquel Avenue in Santa Cruz. If you're looking for a place to have a quiet, safe, clean, very secure remote workspace, this is it. Santa Cruz has a great spot here, Satellite Work and Digital Media Center. You can also check out different media equipment from here. And we share this space with community television, and that is another gem in the community, and provides trainings and lots of programming for our area. Satellite Workspace and Digital Media Center. I encourage you to come check it out, get a tour, and see if it's something you'd like to rent by the hour, by the day, by the week, by the year. It's all available here for you. And the first Friday of the month is free to come and check it out. We have the honor now. I see here on the board that Mr. Ilyea Buliach has called in. So I'm going to, without further ado, bring him in and see how this is going to work. Hello, Ilyea, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much for calling in today. I know it was very short notice. We had discussed last time you were on the show that I would invite you back, but I suddenly had a cancellation, and I thought of you right away, especially given that the issue we had talked about before, wanting to discuss more in Watsonville regarding the 34-unit temporary homeless shelter in Watsonville. That was reported in yesterday's Santa Cruz Sentinel. So I am really glad that you can come on today and talk with us about that. Please introduce yourself. And again, thank you so much.
Thank you for the invite. So my name is Ilyea Buliach. I'm a longtime resident of Watsonville, and I have been involved in a number of citizen involvement and neighborhood organization activities that then involves speaking to and speaking with Planning Commission, the City Council, LAFCO, the Local Agency Formation Commission, the Santa Cruz County Board of Supervisors. I mean, at some of those meetings is where I commonly cross paths with you yourself during your mission on public involvement. And I happen to live in the vicinity of the Westview Presbyterian Church, which is just 2 blocks west of Main Street in Watsonville on Highway 129. So I can say that as a just regular citizen in the public audience that I've been involved from when all along from when this first got introduced into the public realm in June of 2023.
Wow. And what did it look like when it was introduced at that time? What were people told?
A massive, scandalous public controversy. That's what it looked like.
Yeah. Talk with us about the project and what it looked like then and how it looks now.
All right. So you think about this. You have a 1920s wood-framed church, a Presbyterian church that sits on almost 2 acres of land, and it has a single-family minister's residence at the back. Then it's surrounded by a neighborhood that's comparable to the Harvey West Park neighborhood in Santa Cruz. You have heavy industrial uses, retail uses, residential uses, all mixed in, sort of a mixed-type neighborhood. The church is there, and it's gone through an evolution of the members of the congregation. It originally started clustered around the Japanese-American citizen identity, and then it's been evolving from there. Mm-hmm. In the events leading up to 2023, there was a lot of background information going on, and what's the first event that defined what was going on was a gigantic, orchestrated media blitz with KSBW TV News running a special about that church site saying, "Hi, everybody, look what's coming in here next month. We've got this homeless shelter that's setting up shop, and we're going to be up and running here in no time at all, and it's all set to go." And then the Pajaronian ran a news article where the city manager was quoted as saying is that that there is no other way to solve the homeless problem short of putting this low-barrier homeless emergency shelter right here. Okay.
And define for us, I'm sorry to interrupt, define for us what exactly is meant by low barrier.
Low barrier is a defined term by state law, and it pertains to the fact that in the context of a homeless shelter, that you cannot apply filtering criteria. That whenever an entity a person comes along or is brought there by police, steered there by police for shelter, that you can't start doing any screening or applying things like, are you somebody with a criminal record? Are you somebody with persistent substance abuse problems? Are you going through substance abuse activities now? Are you a drug dealer? The whole list of trying to figure out whether a person might constitute a threat to the neighborhood or to the staff there, that cannot be applied. If you are established, permitted, you receive funding, authorization from the state government or the city government where you are identified as a low barrier shelter, you cannot apply filtering protocols.
Wow. That's interesting. You would think that the safety of the other people in there would benefit by knowing some of those issues or filtering some of those issues. Anyway, go ahead.
Oh, well, I was just going to say that you would, but there's a module that probably needs to be addressed. About how do we get to the point where now the state government has some fairly well codified language about low barrier. Well, the fact of the matter is that for all of the candidates forums that I have attended, and then the number of articles that you read about the situation of homelessness, we're talking over 10 years easy. That the slogans and the tropes, the cliches, have run their course. Okay, the fact that you might feel sympathy, that you want to do something, is wonderful, but those things have been tried, and some things make it worse. The problem grinds on. So the proper rejoinder is homelessness. It's complicated.
Yeah.
That's far more difficult than a simple humanitarian drive can possibly hope to resolve.
Yeah.
So the California is suffering from an optics problem. When you have the images of Oakland, Sacramento, San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego, Santa Cruz, the Salinas, Watsonville, tents on sidewalks, individuals utilizing the sidewalks as toilets and latrines, individuals dealing street narcotics in plain view, individuals shooting up with narcotics, individuals stabbing each other, clobbering each other, smashing into stores, shoplifting. Those images now have been on a conveyor belt of transport to media across the globe. California has become a global spectacle. Dan Walters on the syndicated news platform, Cal Matters, has done a series of superb articles that have explained that Governor Gavin Newsom has aspirations for higher office. He has been bedeviled by the optics issue here, and together with his allies in the state legislature, resolved to start getting rapid, fast results at resolving this and getting some of these individuals off of the street. And so what it was is they go, you know what, in order to jumpstart the process, we can't start having a gatekeeper at the entrance to these places. Every time we're trying to steer people into here, you start finding out this person's got a criminal record, this person has a warrant outstanding, this person is known a drug abuser, this person is known as a mugger. It's like we got to get the gatekeeper out of the equation. So then the state government crafted legislation. Look, a low barrier shelter is offered as the first step in a sequence. Our goal is get them off the street, then we're going to allocate resources for intervention services, counseling services, placement services that try to get the rehabilitation started. But in order to make it more effective at getting them off the street, let's get rid of the gatekeepers. So hence low barrier. That's by intent, and there's thought behind it. But there are also some very morbid implications that are behind that as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you see, they want to get the people off the street promptly, and it's coming from the governor on down. The state is an embarrassment for Gavin Newsom, who, again, this is according to Dan Walters, who I consider to be an excellent source, that Gavin Newsom is now got his allies, and it's like we've got to start reducing the head count of these people on the street. Let's just get it where there's no questions asked, low barrier, get in, and then we could start working from there, then I can rehabilitate my global image and then make a decent run at president.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and you know what? In all fairness, it's like, that's reasonable. It's like, okay, maybe you and your allies in Sacramento have contributed to this, but there's a lot of other factors that make homelessness, and now you just said, let's jumpstart it, start thinking outside of the normal boundaries, just try something and get it going. Mm-hmm. Okay, that much I follow, okay, but you start getting to the thing now, and that's what's really quite interesting about what happened here in Watsonville, is that Watsonville now is a sort of a test case. It's an example of now how this plays out in real life.
Mm-hmm. So tell us what happened here that made this news come to the forefront in the Santa Cruz Sentinel. What happened? What is the history of this site?
It's received coverage as far as there was the media blitz in 2023 that mm-hmm. this is coming in, right? Well, guess what happened? Three council members started receiving phone calls from constituents, and then they were watching this and go like, wait a minute, let me see if I got this news right. So, Monterey County government officials have announced that they are the ones that are going to establish a low barrier type of a emergency homeless shelter on this church that's located in Watsonville, which is in Santa Cruz County, not Monterey County. And Monterey County had secured a grant, state funding, so that they will use that money to build a low-barrier homeless shelter in another county, in a city that's in another county, and then they're going to use that homeless shelter in Santa Cruz County to then receive homeless people from Monterey County. So Monterey County officials announced on a media blitz, hi everybody, we're coming in, we've got the transport network already set up, we're bringing homeless people into your county.
Holy cow. That's really messed up.
Three council members...
Pajaro is almost like the city of Watsonville. The county line really should be moved, in my opinion. But anyway, that's another topic. Go ahead.
That's a topic for another day.
Yes, it is.
But I mean, think about it. Put yourself in the shoes of those three council members, Jimmy Dutra and Casey Clarke and Ari Parker. They're sitting there going like, I know you're going to, okay, this is going to be hard for you to believe, but they're going like this. Who came up with this idea?
Yeah.
Those are council members. Those are council members, and they're sitting there. When did this come on the pipeline?
How did this happen?
Nobody told us about this.
Holy cow! How interesting.
So then, when they started making inquiries, they got stonewalling from their own staff.
Wow.
So what they did is that they started making the rounds, and then they found out that amongst themselves, they had a common purpose. Amongst the other four council members, you find out why you don't seem to be too troubled about this.
Mm.
Well, okay, the conclusion manifests itself. Four council members had already engaged in non-agendized meetings setting this up. Three council members have been marginalized, stranded in the weeds. So what did the three council members do? As per the city's own law, they notified the city clerk and they go, we request a special council meeting to receive information and orientation on this subject. So the city clerk scheduled it in June of 2023.
Mm-hmm.
So the one-day agenda posting, special meeting, I went.
Thank you.
And I sat there.
Thank you.
And you had a moderate number of people there, and so then the staff were saying that well, we're planning to have this presented at a regular council meeting. We can't tell you anything because those people can't make it for this. We have them scheduled at a time. And those 3 council members like, no, we're not going to wait. We've been stranded out here. We want answers now.
Yes.
So they want to go, what is going on?
Yeah.
Okay, now we come to this critical node that happened, and that is that as the discussions going on, there were various individuals that were in the audience at the council chambers.
Mm.
There was individuals from some nonprofit organizations, and they launched an attack against those 3 council members. Let me repeat. You have nonprofit groups and certain members of the public showing up to a special council meeting to launch attacks against 3 council members who had called for a special meeting to find out what's going on.
Because they had not been informed.
And
Amazing.
Yet you had these people show up to attack the council members for actually doing their proper duty and obligation to their constituents.
Yes. Wow.
Well, in the process, staff offers what staff's response was when the council members are asking what's going on. They only got some vague notions, and then when the city manager at that time, Rene Mendez, he was explaining to them, no, you need to understand the church. There's a Presbyterian church that's an established denomination. It's a nonprofit organization. They own 3 parcels that are contiguous, same owner and same use, the church across all of it. It's a legal use that's there. And they have then worked out an arrangement with Monterey County. So that's something between the church and Monterey County. That's got nothing to do with us. We're not involved with that.
Oh, come on.
So then the planning director said, we don't know anything about this. We haven't seen anything. The city attorney said, I'm not aware of anything about this. All right. So then the council members are floundering, and then various members of the public came up, and then I spoke. I addressed them. I said they need to clarify. Then, I asked them to investigate. Why did the Pyrrhonian quote the city manager? The city manager said that he never spoke to the Pyrrhonian. He was denying that he ever said that. And I go, why don't you people should investigate and get that clarified? What's going on here? Because that was on the TV news here. It says this is coming in, and yet now city staff is saying that they don't know anything about it.
That's amazing.
Well, there was a mass of discussion, and then shortly thereafter, there was a regular council meeting with a regular agenda item where you had representatives from Monterey County and Santa Cruz County there, as well as nonprofit organization, to explain what that was all about. And all that did is it generated more concern, more questions, more opposition by some of the council members. And the matter at that point in June of 2023, it sort of became lost in uncertainty and questions. Now, here's an important point for everybody to be aware of, and that is that typically the way that this system is set up is that the municipal government or county government, they don't run homeless shelters. They come up with money, but then they have nonprofit organizations construct these shelters. They have nonprofit organizations step in and run the shelters.
Yes.
That's the typical arrangement.
That is typical.
Well, here's the thing. After that time, constituents were contacting their various council members, but it was a black hole. Nobody knew what was going on, and nothing was getting done. So it kind of got lost in a darkness. Yeah. And unbeknownst to the council members or any members of the public, the city government staff, Renee Mendez, the city manager, and then the city attorney and the planning director, they instructed the Monterey County and the church to go ahead and submit a application to get zoning clearance in October of that year. A few months go by, and then they just told them, go ahead and apply for the zoning clearance.
What?
So 3 council members now are still in the dark. They have no idea this is going on, right?
Yeah.
And so then the staff, the city planning department starts processing that. And then your first irregularity happens. The applicant, the church in Monterey County, so they were told that they did not have to make any arrangements for the flood risk issue. That part of Watsonville is in a flood zone. Therefore, typical requirement is that you have to raise the finished floor of structures that are going to be habitable by a prescribed distance above the known historical floodwater height. So the units were going to have to be raised at least 3 feet. And what was the initial understanding was that they were going to take these pre-manufactured modules, with a crane, take them off of a heavy truck trailer, and just set them on a parking lot and then set that up. Well, somewhere along the way, that's what the applicants were led to believe. And then after that zoning administration review process started, the city sent them a letter says, you know what, you're going to have to flood-proof those units. And so that threw the applicant for a loop because they hadn't planned for that.
Yeah.
Even though that issue had been raised during that previous council meeting, one of the council members was asking about, why are you putting it here? That's a flood zone. And no response. And then we find out that the applicant were led to believe that the city was going to waive that requirement, even though that's a federal requirement. And then for some reason, the city backed off of that and reneged on that arrangement.
Probably because of the federal money that they want to get.
Which is always invariably a common factor. But I mean, they ran into the next problem. There's a large underground potable water supply main pipeline that runs on an easement underneath that church parking lot.
Oh.
Well, their original plan was to place all of these modular homeless shelter units in the back, and that was going to be right over the public water main. And then the applicants were told, you can't put a structure on top of a water main. The city needs access to that pipe. So that completely messed up their arrangement.
Yeah.
What apparently what happened next was that those hurdles started piling on logistics problems and cost problems that put the proposal in limbo. Meanwhile, the 3 council members and the members of the public have no idea what's going on.
Still. And who is the city official that's making all of these backroom agreements? Who was that?
The center, the focal point is the city manager.
The city manager.
That was Renee Mendez.
Renee Mendez, who is no longer there.
That's correct. That's its own story. But the city manager derived his authority from what I call the voting block. That's the 4 city council members that are distinct and separate from the 3 marginalized ones.
Oh my gosh. Ilyea, we have a caller, and I think, let me ask if you want to bring her on. I think it's Marta Buliach. Do you want to bring her into the conversation now?
Sure. She actually has more information about this than I do.
All right, let's see if we can bring her on. Hello. Can you hear
Hi
us,
there.
Marta?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you very
Wonderful.
much for calling in. Can you just take a moment, Marta, and introduce yourself? Ilyea is filling us in a bit about all of this, but we'd like to bring you in as part of the conversation. Please introduce yourself.
So my name is Marta Buliach, and I'm a part-time resident of Watsonville, and I'm also Ilya's sister. And I just want to heighten some really critical aspects about this scandal. One in particular is that during that special council meeting, the city manager misled the council. The city manager said we had nothing to do with the application. We didn't do any site identification. But the community development director, Susie Marion, said she had no information about this, and that all she knew that it was going to be an emergency shelter, which they subsequently changed to a low barrier navigation network. And then the attorney just kind of pretended, this is Samantha Zutler, I don't know anything about this. And she had this stammering, right? Well, it turns out from emails that we discovered that in February, 4 months before that, the staff was asked to... Yes.
Marta, okay, hold off on that. Let me just fill in one predicating step, and then you can go ahead and elaborate on
Sure.
that. So you see, that project ran into the floodproofing issue. The project ran into the underground water main issue. At that point, it became stalled. Okay, and then you segued into winter, and then the new year started. Then somewhere in the new year started, the Monterey County and Santa Cruz County had announced that they were going to pump in $2 to $3 million of money to
$3 million.
$3 million from the city,
$3 million
from the county of Santa Cruz.
County and Monterey and Santa Cruz County both were going to contribute funding equaling $3 million to help resolve these sticking points.
Oh, wow.
And keep in mind something, that in June, at that special council meeting, and with that media blitz that I referenced, what it was all pivoting around was the fact that Monterey County announced that they had applied for a state grant that was going to pay for solving some homeless issues in Monterey County. So Monterey County submitted this grant to the state, and they identified that there were homeless people living in the Pajaro River Channel, and that the Pajaro River levees were going to be rebuilt, and that the homeless people were going to be displaced, and that they were going to use this funding to then construct a homeless shelter in Watsonville and then transport the homeless people there. So that was the $8 million was awarded to Monterey County through a competitive grant evaluation process. Monterey County was awarded $8 million to set up this homeless shelter. And as I described to you, then it ran into the sticking points of floodproofing and underground water main. And so it was almost at the point of not viable, and then the two counties resolved to contribute $3 million more. So this thing was now to become an $11 million project.
But
and so then
there's still the issue of the flooding, Go ahead, Ilyea.
So events segued to April of 2024, last year.
Yeah.
Where a new information item was scheduled for a regular Watsonville City Council meeting. And they're the homeless service directors of Monterey County, Roxanne Wilson. She came and then she announced, well, I've got good news, everybody. We've resolved the issues. We've got extra money, and we're gonna floodproof everything, because we're going to spend $1 million to have a whole bunch of big trucks come in and bring fill dirt and then construct a Arizona or New Mexico style Mesa Butte Plateau in the back of the lot, 3 feet high, and we'll pave the top of it and put a masonry block wall around that, and then we'll stack all of these little modular cabins on top of that thing.
Oh, please.
Now everybody else is at ground level, so now we were looking at this, and when I was at that city council meeting, right? I was there too, right? And
Thank
so
you.
I look at that and go, you've got to be kidding me. This is supposed to be a temporary homeless shelter.
Mm-hmm.
You guys have already now gone into, you're going to blow through $1 million to build this earthen building pad 3 feet tall, and here's the other thing, with temporary modular units on there. And I was thinking, but what happens when that runs the course and you take those modular units out? What are you going to do with this raised building pad? It's not usable for a conventional commercial building construction or a apartment complex or workforce housing. It's like a cancer tumor there. So then it's like, what are you going to do? Spend $400,000 to then demolish it and pull it out of there?
Right.
And I started thinking, why on earth would anybody do that?
Mm-hmm.
And the two answers were is that one was that we don't care about throwing the money away, and the other answer was that, well, don't worry, we've got a covert plan to come up with something very different than what anybody's even thinking of. And so we'll just make that work. And, the first thing that comes to mind is Coral Street in Santa Cruz.
Yeah.
There in Harvey West Park, right off of River Street, that's where the Housing Matters homeless shelters is. And, Coral Street is a similar neighborhood to this area here on Riverside Drive. Mm-hmm. It's heavy industrial and retail and then residential. Well, mixing housing with industrial, that's not always a desirable neighborhood. But let me tell you something. When I talked to the people that lived around there, they described that Coral Street, Fern Street, that was still a nice neighborhood to live in. If you didn't mind the industrial impacts, that was still a nice neighborhood.
Right.
Okay? But after that homeless shelter got built, they all concurred. This neighborhood is destroyed forever. Mm-hmm. The homeless shelter that was supposed to start mitigating the homeless situation, to start helping homeless people, and to offer a resource, and a well-funded one. That was a big dollar project there, and it receives large amounts of funding to operate. It ended up drawing way more homeless people, derelicts, anger management basket cases, belligerents. And all of a sudden, it's the whole street covered with tents, homeless people dealing drugs, using drugs, stabbing each other, assaults. Yeah. Then you go like this, that it's spilled over to the people that live around there. Their vehicles broken into, vandalism, then a trespass. And in the process, the consensus was businesses just started getting out of there, and they go, this neighborhood's lost. It's gone.
Yeah.
And again, remember what I alluded to, that homelessness, you end up individuals that start using the tropes about compassion and care and help, and then that's how you resolve this. And that's what was done on Coral Street, and yet it destroyed the whole neighborhood and the community, ostensibly to help the homeless. And yet you have more homeless there than ever before, at least is what the impact on the neighborhood, and with the unfixable urban blight.
Yeah.
And so once everybody in that neighborhood saw what was going on, then that's when they sort of went into action. A neighborhood coalition formed
in Watsonville.
And then in Watsonville, it was headed by the person, a woman who lives right next door to where the homeless shelter is going to be, Catalina Torres. She got involved, got activated, put together a coalition, and then the coalition retained the services of a competent government law and land use attorney, William Seligman. who then initiated a public records request to start assembling an analytical report of what's going on and to provide competent legal advice to the people. And then a number of pieces of information and a number of events occurred at that point that helped to start illustrating what was really going on.
Yeah.
And at this juncture, I'm going to hand it over to Marta.
Okay. Can I just ask one question, though? How is piling dirt 3 feet high going to address the problem of the underground water supply line?
Well, the piling up the dirt is to resolve the flood control issue.
Right. But
if
that pipe is still there. Anyway,
Sure,
Marta...
and what
They moved the location, though.
Oh.
So they redesigned this thing on paper a multitude of times. But I want to go back to just February of 2023. Monterey County and Santa Cruz County, Watsonville was a co-applicant of the ERF2 grant. And that grant was a fraudulent grant because that grant omitted zoning issues as hurdles which they are required to disclose. One of those was FEMA. One of those would have been the need for the church to get a special use permit as well. And so, and also pets, because initially the grant said we can bring people's chickens and farm animals. Well, there's a city code that you can't have chickens in there. So this was just a completely falsified grant, and they got it, and they did that because, as Ilyea mentioned before, it was a very competitive process. Then I'm going to go into the council meeting, the special council meeting of June. You really need to watch these videos of how the city manager, Renee Medez, the city attorney, Samantha Zutler, and the community development director, Susie Merriam, absolutely misled the council. Wow. Then you can see from, as Ilyea mentioned, about these letters, these planning guidance letters that first omitted FEMA requirement and then included it. Well, then that fast forward, that was happened in November. Fast forward 5 months later, the county office administrator of Monterey, Sonia De La Rosa, wrote a letter to the state saying, oh me, oh my, we just learned about this FEMA issue. We need more time. Well, they knew about it from June because Councilmember Casey Clarke said, that church is in a flood zone. They knew about it in November because on the application it says FEMA flood zone. And they knew about it because their builder, Dignity Moves, actually wrote an email to Monterey County saying, and this is roughly in the spring of 2024, saying, we knew it was an issue all the time.
Wow.
So they were trying to railroad that thing through, and for some reason, and they said Susie was supposed to wave her magic wand, basically, and let that go through. So then you have this, we're at the status point, right? Yeah.
Marta, let me just interject one thing. So, Becky, here's the important thing for everybody to understand, that up to April of 2024, we, the members of the public, and at least those 3 council members, we were relying upon the city staff and the agenda reports that were there. We were relying upon that for guidance, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So then in April, when we saw like that, how did you get to the point where they're going to be building this raised earthen pad there, and then this thing got relocated to a location? Which process are you people using for this? So when it was the city attorney, the attorney for the coalition, Mr. Seligman, when he made formal request for the relevant public documents that led to that, when he got the batch of public documents, it's only at that point that then everybody started discovering what was really going on. You see my point?
It was all
and that was even though the city of Watsonville violated the Public Records Act because they didn't give the attorney all the information.
Yeah.
So then you had
we were operating under like you trust your public administrators.
Yes.
You trust the civil service to give you the guidance and the information. All right. So then it's only when the the attorney got the documents, and then when you went through the document, you realized, oh my God, everything that Watsonville City government staff had said at the public meeting that was there for the press, for the public, for other city employees, as well as the council members.
The council members themselves.
Council members, all these people were sitting there. We were able to discern that was all false.
That's
Renee
amazing.
Mendez, the planning director, the city attorney, they were just blatantly across the public floor there in a public meeting making blatantly false statements.
That's incredible.
And after that, we suddenly realized this has very little to do with the homeless shelter. It's got everything to do with a whole bunch of much bigger public policy issues.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I will hand it back over to Marta to fill in some of those following threads on that.
Okay, we've got 9 minutes, but I'm gonna, if you have time to stay on into the second hour after the news break, I would welcome that. There may be some other issues that we'll want to bring in if other callers do join in the second hour, but I want to give you the full time to explain this because this is a travesty in government.
Sure.
It is illegal, it seems, but what do you do? I mean, they do these things.
We have now our experiences constitute a case study of what you do.
Yes.
We could tell you exactly how it played out, for the process of exhausting your remedies. We could tell you exactly how it played out.
Good. So please carry
your
on.
News break begins
Thank
at
you.
what time?
The second hour begins at 3:06 after the news break, but I want to give you the full time here because your work is incredible. You are model citizens, and I hope that people out there listening really sit up and pay attention here because we all want to trust our local government. But the story that Ilyea and Marta are telling us is showing us something very different with the city of Watsonville government, and it is shocking. So please carry on. Thank you.
I'd like to start. Thank you, Becky. I really appreciate your support, and I really appreciate that there's a media outlet here that's actually going to allow the story to be told competently. And what we discovered in April, also in the April 2024 City Council meeting, is Roxanne Wilson from Monterey County, who ad nauseum talks about how transparent Monterey County is, declared that they were breaking ground on the project in June.
Whoa.
Now, yes. She said, we're breaking ground in June. Mind you, they had submitted a zoning clearance permit application, which they did not disclose to the attorney in a public document request. They hadn't even gotten any building permit to do this. So all of a sudden, there's panic in the city, and they start fast-tracking things. And they won't reveal things, and they had community meetings that they didn't properly notice. So they would give notice to the community leader, Catalina Torres, the same day, saying, we're having a meeting today, and thinking that they could just bulldoze her because they've really marginalized in this community of working-class Latino residents, and they've weaponized this process. It's a new low for even the city of Watsonville. Wow. And so then they're doing a concurrent building permit submission evaluation along with a new zoning clearance permit application. It's actually an amended one, and they do it concurrently, which is real violation of typical building procedure. And they keep on amending it, and then lo and behold, when Bill Seligman wrote a letter on behalf of the neighborhood at the end of July, that's when they changed it from an emergency shelter to a low barrier navigation center, because they knew they were in a legal pickle. And Ilyea can elaborate further on that. But the documents that come into this at this point in time is when really the neighborhood started getting momentum and realized that they were being completely screwed over. And I got to tell you, there was an article that the Pararonian did, which was a great article, that talked about the homeless-related crime impacting the neighborhood. In particular, there's a woman, Lorena Vasquez, who has a daycare center, and she was being terrorized by a homeless person.
Wow.
And then you had you have these 98-year-old abuelas walking to Burger King and getting attacked. And so all this violence is kept quiet, right? It's like we're not seeing it, except it started to come out in that news article. But I have to tell you how abusive the officials were. Supervisor Felipe Hernandez, he wrote in that article, quoted, "I'm indifferent to the neighborhood opposition." Imagine that,
What?
right? He represents, that's quoted. That is quoted both in the Parroni and the Good Times article. And Montesino, a council member Montesino, he just called these people lacking empathy and NIMBYs, right? And also Felipe Hernandez's office, when these neighbors called in, right, they just called them ignorant. And Louis Alejo from Monterey County, he, in a Monterey County meeting with Roxanne Wilson last August, called them uninformed, and that Felipe was going to do some kind of propaganda piece to inform these people. And during that meeting, which was really important, there's all recordings of it, and all of it was submitted to the Council and Planning Commission for the appeals. Louis Alejo actually says, CAB is not qualified to run this shelter.
Wow.
CAB refers to a nonprofit organization that provides support and assistance to indigent people and other individuals of disadvantaged status. Community Action Board is a long-established nonprofit organization that provides social service support in Santa Cruz County.
Yeah.
And this is now kind of what brings us to a critical point here. That remember Gavin, as Dan Walters pointed out, Gavin Newsom, together with his alliance in the legislature, was desperate to start demonstrating that he is a competent governor, that the legislature is competent, start shoveling out billions of dollars of money out there and get it out there and get these things going. The state Department of Housing subsection that was then administering this, what they were looking for is, we've got a lot of money, but there's more applicants than money. We're going to start filtering what we want. We want to see applications. We want to see applications where the applicant has lined up that they've got the homeless community they're going to serve identified. They want a head count. They want the application to show where you are going to establish the shelter. They want the applicant to identify that all zoning hurdles have been cleared, that all legal hurdles have been cleared. They want the applicant to specify which entities are going to be constructing it. They want to see which those are qualified track record. They want to see which nonprofit organizations are going to be running it. They want to see what the qualifications are, what the competence, what the track record is. Monterey County made the first fateful step. They put in there that all of the zoning hurdles had been cleared. There were no construction impediments, even though, number one, it was a flood zone. Number two, you had a water main underground. Number three, you had an existing church there that is a conditional use, which means it's required to get a public use permit. So there is a whole body of complicating land use requirements whenever you have an existing conditional use on a property.
Yeah.
Monterey County officials omitted all of that information knowingly from that application.
Wow.
All right, next thing.
That's
they
a
identified
lie.
that it's unbelievable.
Unbelievable, and unbelievable that the state would accept this. They must know. They must know. And we've got about 30 seconds here, so take it to a place where we can take a break.
We're going to talk about the zoning code.
Okay.
We're going to go to the zoning code.
Okay. Folks, please stay tuned to the second hour. I'm honored to have with me Marta and Ilyea Buliach, longtime residents in Watsonville, very politically active, working to save the integrity of our neighborhoods and transparency in local government, because it is missing, obviously, in this action from Watsonville City government. Stay with us for the second hour of Community Matters. We'll continue this conversation, and maybe you can call in with your questions to these two. Stay with us. We'll be back. Okay, can you still hear me? Oops. No.
I sure
Yes.
Can you
can.
still hear me?
Yes.
Hello, Ilyea?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Oh,
Hello?
yes, now I hear you. I
Becky?
punched a button, yes. Sorry.
All
Yes,
right.
we can talk. We're not on the air now.
Okay.
Got it.
We've got 6
it.
minutes, so we can talk here. And this is incredible. Thank you so much for all you're
Thank you
doing.
for having us on the show, because it's fully documented too. We submitted a 400-page document to the Planning Commission, a 100-page document to the City Council, because this whole zoning issue gets to be much more complicated. And Ilyea is quite adept at explaining it at a comprehensive level, although all the council members pretended they didn't understand. And same with the Planning Commission. And we have the city planner, Matt Orbach, who is as mendacious as his other colleagues. And one of the other things is Tamara Vitas, the new city manager, wasted no time in also being mendacious. And so she claimed that there was no application in June of 2024. And that there was most indeed an application, because we talked about it. It was submitted in October, November of 2023. So all these lies continued and started to get more compounded. So we were just digging up as much information as we could. And there's a document request that the attorney did on Monterey County in August. We're slowly getting dribs and drabs of those documents.
Wow.
Yep. And so it's really, the scandal is incredible. And I say at the crux of it, honestly, Becky, is that the city council approved this even though staff egregiously lied to the public, right? And so it just tells you what the culture is, but they're just doing, honestly, what the city council members told them to do, in my opinion. And Ilyea can expound on that.
I thought
That's absolutely correct.
Go ahead. I thought it was amazing in the Sentinel. It talks a little bit about the appeal that Ms. Torres put in with 32 points, and regarding the meeting that were substantial enough to warrant granting an appeal, and felt her characterization of the agenda was inaccurate. This is Orbach saying. Regarding the Seligman letter, which was withheld.
It was
correct.
Withheld. He said Seligman did not request a response, so staff did not feel it necessitated a reply. And most of the issues
legal analysis.
And most of the issues raised were addressed in the staff report. That is just so egregious. Incredible.
The most egregious thing was that the staff didn't address Seligman's point.
Yeah.
They didn't address it, and yet they falsely stated to the Planning Commission, we already addressed everything. And so then the appeal to the City Council from the Planning Commission said staff did not address Seligman's issues. They had no right to withhold that letter from the Planning Commission.
Wow. This is incredible. We've got another caller coming in. I'll wait. It's Pat O'Reilly from the Valley, and he would like to join the conversation. Do you want to bring him in, or do you want to wait a little bit before? I think
the only thing I wonder about, would that be that then a person asks a question, or is that would then be a person like in a round table sitting in and participating as well? What's your preference?
Oh, he's talking in his thing. He wants to talk with someone about how to charge a laptop. So I'm not going to accept the call. I'm not. He just dropped
not relevant
off.
to what we got going on.
I think he was thinking it was a different program because we have a program about technicalities. So he must have been listening to a different program. Anyway,
Must have been.
We've got about a minute before we go on the air. So I'm just going to hand the floor to you. And with great thanks, I'll just repeat a little bit about what we're talking about, and I'll hand it over to you, okay?
Well, that's fine. I'll just keep running with what I got.
Talking about zoning.
We got the predicating things there, so then you start getting to, we're close approaching to where we're at now.
Yeah, and that's, I think, important to do because it has been in the local news media. Very large article in the Sentinel. I don't know what the Pajaronian wrote, but it was on the front page.
It was a pretty substantial article as well.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good.
But it's interesting, none of them have addressed the city staff lying. None of them, they've just ignored that, glossed over it. And none of them have really understand or addressed the zoning issue.
Yeah, well, they want to keep on good terms with their sources is what that's probably about. But the people need to know. The people need to know, and thank you. We've got about 10 seconds. So
okay.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your calling in and your good work. Here we go.
Well, thank you for inviting us.
So, welcome back to Community Matters. This is your host, Becky Steinbrunner, and I am very honored to be here with two fabulous public activists from Watsonville, Marta and Ilyea, Buliach, and they filled us in the first hour on what has happened in the city of Watsonville. Amazing and very shocking information about city officials and Monterey County officials working in cahoots behind closed doors with some of the city council members, but not all, and refusing to give full and clear information. So, Ilyea and Marta, I want to thank you for staying over into the second hour because this is really important, and here's why. People want to believe that their elected officials know what's going on and will represent them and do the best for the people, their constituents. People want to believe that those up there in city offices are telling the truth. And what you have uncovered is completely the opposite in this case. So please continue, and thank you.
Well, okay, so to continue where I left off, and then this will kind of open up to really what's going on. And that's the key thing. What's really going on here? And as I was mentioning, that part of what the state grant was is that you have to identify who's going to be operating that shelter and that it has to be qualified. And Monterey County designated a A-list, Platinum Circle operator, Home First from Milpitas, a nonprofit organization that has extensive experience, qualifications in running it. So you see, Monterey County, they go, we don't have any zoning impediments, so we've got a clear run, and we've got the best of the best lined up to run it. So they submitted the application to the state. The state looked at it and goes, wow, this is great. You guys are ready to have a top-notch operation set up and running in the shortest amount of time. You get your $8 million. So the Monterey County announced it, and then they did the media blitz, right? Well, the first round of controversy erupted, and then as the end of 2023 approached, guess what happened? Monterey County shoved Home First out of the equation.
Wow. A well-known operator.
Then what did they do? Did they get another operator, qualified operator? No. They go, we're going to give it to Community Action Board of Santa Cruz County, who does not fulfill the statutory requirements for operating that shelter.
Wow. Why do you think they did that?
That is because Community Action Board is a large, influential nonprofit organization, and the political majorities in the counties and the city, they all want that nonprofit organization to prosper and thrive. And when they saw the sums of money that are getting ladled out by the state for this, they resolved that they go, we're gonna apply, we're gonna get that $8 million, and then we will go ahead and then start manipulating the whole thing so that we steer that money into our local favored nonprofit organization.
Oh, wow.
And In legal terms, that's called conversion. You identified one operator that was qualified, and now what you've done is that you push them out, and now you substitute this other one who is not qualified. And what that does is it renders the original grant application to the state completely fraudulent.
Yes, it does.
They deceived the state about the fact that all the zoning impediments were clear. They deceived the state about who would be operating it. Then they got the $8 million. They got the $8 million in a preference over all of the other entities that had applied, because they were perceived as being more ready to set up and get the thing up and running.
Shovel ready.
Guess what? The zoning impediments we had not identified, and then the zoning impediments manifested themselves, then the project got stalled. Okay, so right now, the mission of the whole state encampment resolution funding was not met because you falsified your zoning clearance. Then you had the qualified operator identified, and then you pushed them out. That became a center of controversy, causing more delay. You didn't accomplish the mission that the governor and the state had set out for this.
No.
That's a central theme, and guess what? Neither Lookout.com, neither Santa Cruz Sentinel, neither the Register Paronian, neither KSBW News, none of those entities will touch that issue.
They have to keep their sources secured,
down
don't
the
they?
drain, $24 billion scattered across the state, and as Dan Walters pointed out, there's no auditing, no accountability, no efficiency studies. It's just money going down the drain, wasted.
Yes. No audits. That's the piece that bothers me.
That's right.
No
and Monterey
audit.
County is not new to fraud here. Monterey County had I think it was about $11 to $14 million grant to convert a hotel in King City, and they partnered with an entity called Shangri-La Developers. And Shangri-La got the money, deposited it in their bank account, and promptly squandered it on a luxury item. Now, Rob Monta is actually doing allegedly some sort of investigation on that because Shangri-La.
That's the Attorney General.
Yeah.
Just didn't limit their fraud to Monterey County. But, going back to here, now we have Monterey County falsifying an ERF2 grant. We have Monterey County falsifying letters to the state describing why they're delayed. And then one of the other things I want to highlight is they knew this church needed a special use permit. Mm-hmm. And that came out in minutes from the Salvation Army. And the Salvation Army minutes were produced in a document request, and they showed how they were angling to make this church the location, but because of its non-conforming use, they knew they were going to use a special use permit. So it appeared that they just wanted to kind of keep this on the down low and railroad it through, because otherwise it would turn out to what we have today. And one important thing also to note about the church, in the minutes, it also talked about how the church had a lot of violent activity due to homeless-related crime on its site. So they know the area is dangerous, and yet the pastor doesn't live, the reverend doesn't live there. He doesn't live in the manse that's rented. And they're just indifferent to the impact that this is going to have on the neighborhood.
The congregation is indifferent, or do they know?
Great question.
I could give you some information on that. You have a split there. There was a congregation that had a large number of Japanese American community that had been actually the founders of the church. A lot of those dynasties now, the descendants now, they have moved out of the area. The critical mass isn't there, and now you have a new congregation that's come in. They have a different center of gravity of thought. They now seem to be clustered around the support for the idea of putting that shelter there. But I have to put one qualifying note that is critical, and it's this. You might think, wait a minute, why would an established religious denomination want to put a low-barrier shelter right next to where their parishioners park and go, and they have events, and that's a low-barrier shelter that will accept drug addicts, people with warrants outstanding, people that are violent. All of those, you cannot filter those people out. You're not allowed to filter them out. So why would a church do that? Well, the Monterey County is planning to pay the church somewhere around a little over $1,000 a month rent. But you would think, and now in this day and age, that hardly seems worth it. Well, now it gets more interesting. The church rents out office space to, yeah, you guessed it, Community Action Board for various offices. So there's already a commercial connection between the church and Community Action Board. Okay, but now it gets even better, because as part of this deal then, the Monterey County is going to give the church a brand new asphalt parking lot. Okay, so now you're picking up another $100,000. Okay, but it gets better, because the Community Action Board is, by the time this is done, it's possible the Community Action Board is going to be pulling in $4 or $5 million of unaudited funds.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me this. What odds do you give that Community Action Board is going to slip $500,000 or $1 million cash under the table to the church?
Well, I don't want to speculate on that, but on its face,
all right,
this whole thing stinks. And the other piece is we don't know what the parishioners have been told either.
Actually, we do. Actually, we do, because we talked to some of them.
Oh, okay. Fill us in here. This is getting worse and worse by the moment. Please help us out here.
What they're told is that that there is no risk to the parishioners, that this has been done before and that it works out beautifully. And the case study that they gave was in Santa Barbara. And so the parishioners, they go, I don't understand what you're upset about. This thing just works out beautiful. That we were given the case study. And Marta could fill in the details on that now.
Well, that case study is Santa Barbara is not a low-barrier shelter. It's more of interim housing. Yeah. And so they keep on using this example. So consequently, as we started to discover the parishioners were very misled, we also believe that the pastor, Dan Hoffman, was as well. And what I did was we reached out to the executive presbytery in San Jose, a gentleman, Dr. Neil Pressa, to come and host a meeting.
Yeah.
And so we had about 40 people from the community come to meet with Neil Pressa and Reverend Dan Hoffman to discuss their problems in the community. So we have people chased by axes. We have people whose homes, they come home from a late night at work, and there's a homeless person on their couch doing their laundry.
Wow.
The stories are horrific. And I could see that Dan Hoffman was troubled, and then he wrote an email after that meeting to Monterey County saying, gosh, can't we select the people? This is just harrowing. We really rather have, maybe we can, first test people who are pre-selected, which defies the whole purpose of a low-barrier navigation center.
Right.
So he got misled as well, because he's got this pipe dream that this is going to work out magnificently, just like Santa Barbara. It's a very different circumstance.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the things that was very troubling about the church. And I'll add one other component that happened at the Planning Commission in December. One of the neighborhood coalition members talked about there was an attempted homicide at the church. And Dan Hoffman
in the church.
In the church?
That's what he said.
Almost related.
Goodness. Oh, my goodness.
So we're really talking about dangerous circumstances here.
Yeah.
And I tell you, Becky, if you go to the neighborhood and you meet with the constituents and they tell you these stories, they are terrified. One gentleman who was stalked by a homeless person with a 2-foot machete say he didn't want to leave his house for 2 weeks. And he was crying when he was telling us this. And we were just agonized listening, just sick to my stomach about how this city's officials are so indifferent to this. And if you go along Front Street and you meet the people there, their tires are slashed. It's just like, this is a really vulnerable community that city officials have completely abused.
So
and I think it's important, Ilyea, to talk about the zoning too, because this is kind of the crux of a lot of it.
Becky, you wanted to say something?
Before we go there, I want to know, where is the police chief, Chief Zamora?
He's
in the midst of all of this?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you're asking in terms of like a policy position. Where's he at? Is that correct?
What did he attend? Was he at the meeting with Pastor Hoffman and Presta? Was he there?
No, he was not.
No, he was not.
Yeah, because I'll bet he's got a pretty good handle on the crime statistics in that area too, if they're reported. It seems
he gave a report on that during a public workshop held by the City Council last year. He gave a report on that. He demonstrated that whole neighborhood where the proposed low barrier shelter is to be, he gave a report showing that area has the highest concentration of homeless-related crime in the entire city.
Wow. And those city council members, with the exception of a few, still approved it. That's amazing.
Correct.
Still approved it with the staff lying to them,
yeah,
falsifying the data. Still approved it in violation of their own zoning code.
Their own zoning code.
Becky,
this is amazing. I'm just blown away.
Here's a critical factor that setting up a shelter so that homeless people can get out of the elements is still desirable, except that the case studies now start showing that you got to be careful about this. So if you have what's called the draw or the magnet for homeless people, and a substantial portion of these homeless people that are clustering here are serious drug addicts.
Yeah.
That's why they end up that downward spiral. They become drug addicts. Then they can't hold employment. They can't make things work. They can't even coexist with their family members. They end up homeless. They look for the path of least resistance. That happens to be the Pajaro River. That's where they go. There's already a community of all types of people that have issues. Some people lost their jobs. Some people have got mental health issues. Some people have substance abuse. Some people have got a bench warrant out. It's a whole mix. Once they get down there, then all of a sudden it takes some momentum. And then the drug cartels start bringing the transports of narcotics. These people start dealing drugs. Then they go to their tents and their camps down there in the river. And so then they get drugs, they deal drugs, they use drugs. And then in the process, then they could go to the institutional soup kitchens, the feeding establishments. Then they could meander around and do the shoplifting. Then they could go around and start stealing catalytic converters. They settle into a groove. Okay, you would think, well, don't you want the homeless shelter to solve that? I would, except when I look at Coral Street in Santa Cruz, the homeless shelter, which is a far more funded and big operation than what Watsonville's will be, does nothing but bring homeless people to saturate the whole neighborhood and then destroys the neighborhood. And the Santa Cruz government officials, number one, have demonstrated both they're incapable and unwilling to do anything about it. So the minute that the homeless shelter set up shop there, you could kiss the neighborhood goodbye. Go take a look then in Bernal Street in San Jose. They set up the low barrier shelter there. All it did is brought the waves of homeless people to there. And then the homeless people finally got to the point where they go, this is pretty good, but it's more fun just living by the homeless shelter and just sleep inside of my RV and pick up and camper on the streets in the vicinity of the shelter. So that thing then drew the people there. The police were told, hands off, those are homeless people, leave them alone. That neighborhood has been destroyed, and the mayor and the city council unwilling and unable to do anything about that. Wow. So you see, low barrier shelters are extremely risky business.
Yeah.
Now, what's needed, here's the critical thing.
Okay, but I want to make sure you have time to talk about the zoning.
All right.
I want to make sure you have plenty of time to talk about the zoning.
That's the
All
crux
right.
of the matter here too, right now. What they've voted on. So, Ilyea, I think you should go to a non-conforming use. And
Well, here's the thing:
Mm-hmm.
if you have a property and then you have a use on there that's called conditional, which means that it's required to have a use permit. All right, you have well-established zoning administration law and rule that says that you cannot introduce another use onto that property to compete with the existing use until you reevaluate the use permit for the use that's already there.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a use like here, the church uses the whole property, all right? You want to take a quarter acre of land, 10,000 square feet out of there, and then allocate it for a homeless shelter? Okay? You need to then open up the use permit for the church in order to then reconfigure the conditions of approval and an assessment of what's there in order to figure out how to mitigate against the evolution of a entrenched nuisance or urban blight. Well, guess what? The church was established there in the 1920s before Watsonville had a zoning code. The church doesn't have a use permit.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, that's not a problem because then you're grandfathered in. You can keep operating without a use permit.
Mm-hmm.
However, Watsonville City zoning code then specifies you can continue operating as long as you don't change anything.
Mm-hmm.
If you propose to change anything, you have to get your use permit then. The use permit then will resolve having the use permit, plus it allows the city government and the community to make an assessment then of what's being changed and then what type of conditions of approval need to be applied onto the church, which is a conditional use, in order to plan for and mitigate any potential nuisances. So that was the zoning impediment, the obligation that the Watsonville Planning Department was legally obligated to do.
Yes.
They didn't do it.
Wow. Wow.
And so that was brought up in the appeal to the Planning Commission that point out, and again, let me add something. You cannot require the homeless shelter to get a use permit by local zoning code and by relevant state law. The homeless shelter is termed by right in the local code. It's called principally permitted. That means that you cannot require the homeless shelter to get a use permit. It has to be approved by just the actions of the city staff. So there's no dispute on that point. Everybody agrees. The homeless shelter does not require a use permit, and it cannot be required to get one. However, the city's zoning code clearly stipulates that where it's a conditional use, that it means it requires a use permit, that has to have its use permit status evaluated and properly conditioned through a public hearing with a noticing and a use permit with new conditions of approval. And since the church doesn't have a use permit, then it has to go and get the use permit and get that properly configured and approved. Mm-hmm. Watsonville city government officials adamantly refused to do that.
Wow.
So that was appealed to the Planning Commission. And in addition, we presented, take a look at this. Watsonville city staff made false statements about this. They withheld information from 3 council members. They refused to provide public documents to the attorney representing the neighborhood coalition to help the attorney understand what's going on before he gives them any legal advice. City government officials refused to provide that. So those were all articles that were presented to the Planning Commission requesting them to establish public policy recommendations in the midst of all of this. Well, guess what? The Planning Commission unanimously voted, number one, to support and back city staff making false statements to the detriment of people. Planning Commission voted to support city staff from withholding what activities they were engaged in, such as working with Monterey County to get the state grant. The Planning Commission voted to back and support staff to withhold relevant public documents from affected members of the public.
Wow. And
they voted unanimously. They voted unanimously.
They supported that. They probably had not read any of it, I'm guessing. When they
it was in the written appeal.
Oh.
It was written. These items were written in the appeal. I mean, how could they get to what they? You might be right, but I mean, the Planning Commission was given a staff report with the written appeal. It was there in plain English to them. The city manager and staff made false statements about their involvement with this. They withheld notifying council members about this. They refused to provide the public documents to the coalition attorney. So that was all presented to the Planning Commission members.
Yeah.
And they go, oh, we don't care. We don't care about that. we want the staff to be able to do these things.
Incredible.
And I think, Ilyea, it's important to talk about Government Code Section 65662.
Well, what happened was once Mr. Seligman started representing the neighborhood coalition, and he sent a letter saying that because you have the church there, you have to then require the church to get a use permit that then the use permit will recognize and state where the homeless shelter is, where it will operate, and then assign that to the homeless shelter. Then the use permit should be structured to specify where is it that the church will have its entitlement and what it will be allowed to do, where and how. So Seligman explained that in the letter. City never responded to Seligman. And then after the city got the letter, the evidence indicates
the city did respond to Seligman, and they basically said, so these are some of the issues we're thinking about as well, but they never addressed the legal details.
All right.
And they said once we get another application or whatever, we'll be able to comment.
Yeah, but here's the thing: what the city staff then did, the evidence shows is they go, we've got to find some kind of an angle to make an argument that our hands are tied and that the state law doesn't let us do anything. So then they found a government code section, state government code section 65662, that states that a low barrier shelter is allowed by right. It's principally permitted. So there. Well, sure, but even if it's allowed by right or principally permitted, there's nothing written in State Government Code Section 65662 that preempts consideration of existing conditional uses on the property. There's nothing there, and we brought that point up. There's nothing there. Mm-hmm. So that code does not preempt your authority over the church.
Yeah.
Well, when we got to the city council, meeting, and then the appeal document was presented there,
were two appeals filed. There were two appeals filed, right? There was an appeal against to the Planning Commission on December 3rd,
Correct.
and they denied that. December 3rd, they denied that. Then Ms. Torres submitted another appeal on December 16th, and that was denied. So then it was taken to the city council. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct.
Okay.
The zoning administrator, which is the planning director, approved the zoning clearance at staff level in September of last year.
Yes.
All right. That's you can't do an appeal until a government official makes an action.
Yeah. So it was appealed on October 2nd and heard on December 3rd. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And
that was an appeal of the zoning administrator's decision to approve clearance. That there was an appeal filed to the Planning Commission to overturn the zoning administrator's decision.
So the December 16th appeal was to overturn the Planning Commission's decision and take that to the City Council.
Exactly.
Okay. And that's what's being reported now is the action that the City Council took to stand behind this nonsense and fraudulent.
That's right. And realize if no appeals were filed, this would just be going through in the background.
That's the deal, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
That's what they count
the
on.
The onus that the city put on this neighborhood is egregious.
Yeah. Yes, and withholding documents. I'm reading here this is in the yesterday's Santa Cruz Sentinel front page and continued on to page A2. It says that the city did not include the Attorney Seligman's letter in the packet that went to with the appeal information, and said
that was to the Planning Commission.
And
that was
said
to the Planning Commission.
To the Planning Commission that it did not. They did not think it was necessary to do so. The attorney did not request a response, so they didn't feel they needed to reply. That's disgusting.
That's their line. That's their line.
And most of the issues raised were addressed in the staff report, and you're telling me that's a lie too.
It's demonstrably false.
Yes. Incredible.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'd like to give you another 10 minutes here because there are some things that have happened about the Moss Landing fire that I want to just announce and give anybody a chance that wants to call in. So please.
Sure.
Thank you. I really, really appreciate you telling this story and for all of your work. So please continue.
Sure. Thank you. Well, okay, so let's just wrap this up then. Where are we at now? That what we've got is now a mass of public policy issues that have all of a sudden clustered in one place. Number one, you have the Watsonville City government officials now that withhold relevant information from elected council members, favoring an entrenched voting bloc. Then you have all of your major city government officials that publicly make egregious false statements to the public, the press, the city employees, and the other council members. Then you have the Watsonville City government employees withholding relevant public documents from affected neighbors about controversial issues surrounding there. And what you have now is that both the unanimous Planning Commission support and endorse those actions, and the majority of the City Council support those actions. And even more telling, even for the two council members who voted against that supported the appeal and voted against denying it.
Please say their names. Let's give them credit that is due. The names of those two.
Clarke and R.E. Parker.
Thank you.
What was really strange to us, even those two individuals refused to read into the record any thoughts about those types of actions by their own staff. They wouldn't read any criticism of such action into the record. And Marta, you can chime in on this, but it just looks like they were given a gag order by the city attorney and city manager, something along the lines of, you better not bring that up because you're just going to open up the city to excessive legal liability, so you just keep your mouth shut. And they did.
Incredible.
There was a complaint around the process. They didn't appreciate the process, and there was some blame around prior city manager Renee Mendez. But the reality is, this is persistent. This didn't go away with Renee Mendez's departure. This is what Matt Auerbach presented during both the Planning Commission and the City Council meeting is just not accurate.
Right. Hey, you know what? We have Catalina Torres on the line. Can I bring her in?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. All right. Ms. Torres, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for joining this conversation. And you know what? I'm just going to let the three of you run here because I am so grateful to you and the hard work that you have done to try to uphold government process, transparency, and accountability. So please, the rest of the hour is yours, and thank you for your good work. Ms. Torres, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you.
Please
for
introduce yourself.
taking my call. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
For us in this district, has been really, really difficult for quite a long time.
Yeah.
At the beginning, because we were never, at least I think the person who represents this district in District 1, well, he didn't even consider us at all to just tell us what's coming. We didn't know at all. Nobody said anything.
What was the name of your district supervisor?
Montesinos. He didn't take his
Eduardo
time.
Montesino.
Yeah.
Eduardo Montesinos, yes. And I knew about all this project for a neighbor that told me. She was so worried, and I said, "What's going on? What happened? Do you know that shelter's coming and they're coming from the levee? I'm so worried. I live alone. I know there's so much going on here. I see needles. I know people. We live right across the church, and I called him and I said, "Hey, what's going on?" But all my neighbors were so worried, so appalled that we just need to know. I think everybody deserves to know what's coming to your neighborhood, is how it's going to work. But nobody did.
Wow.
No one did. No one in the council and the city of Watsonville mentioned anything to us. We're like, okay, so what's gone with the district? Where's our representative? Where is he?
Yeah.
He didn't take his time to say something or to, I don't know, something.
There should have been a town hall meeting.
We knew about it for a neighborhood that they heard from the church. Like, what do you mean? Why do we hear from them? We need to hear it from the right people, and that's why we are starting with all this going on. I mean, we had so many meetings, and you hear so many people. Like I said before, and I really want to be clear of it. I know the need. We know exactly the need of a shelter, but downtown Watsonville is not the right place.
No.
Downtown Watsonville, and when I said it's downtown Watsonville, because a lot of kids walk through downtown.
Right.
It's a busy area, and as we mentioned before, there's nobody in and out can guarantee that there's not going to be a drug dealing. In fact, the person that lives right next to it, one neighbor, said it's going drug dealing right there this time.
And the downtown in general, the downtown businesses need to have a safe place for people who come and shop at their places and their restaurants. Exactly. What are they saying?
Well, they're all complaining.
They're not involved.
They're not involved.
Some of them last week, one lady went and complained as well. I mean, trust me, we've been complaining. It's just to hear us. Just please hear us.
Yeah.
I think that you have to have a community involved. We were not involved at all. Meaning, you want to do something like this. Well, what about we can just look another place so everybody can feel safe? Because as the chief said, this district is going through a lot already.
Yeah.
Let's be fair to everybody. Let's have a good shelter with a good place for them, and making sure this community will be good and safe, and we can walk through the streets and be okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just it's an even a balance, adjust, and exactly what I was saying. Like, let's be justice with this. Let's have justice around here.
Yeah.
Because social justice is what we say. Like, let's be fair with our community who's going through a lot already, and here we go. And I thought we were going to be with the shelter, like, okay, they're going to, go and have their own space. Well, they're going to have their own space in the same District 1, 2 blocks away from the river. 2 blocks.
Wow. And Monterey County's got the money and is going to be busing them over.
That is correct.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
And Watsonville City, actually you got 5 Watsonville City Council members. They want that. They support that. They want that. They voted for it. So staff, as we pointed out in the course of this program here, we pointed out that Watsonville City staff, look at the city manager, she pulls in a total compensation package close to $500,000 a year. The department heads are getting close to $400,000 a year. You have $4 or $5 million per year of staff power right there that's deceiving the marginalized council members, making false statements to the media, to the public, and to other council members, and you have them withholding public documents. And 5 council members are allied with propping them up, sanctioning and condoning that to go on so that then they could get projects like this established in violation of their own zoning code and to the detriment of their own citizens.
Exactly.
So you see, it's a gigantic public policy question is, what do you do? What do you do when all of a sudden, well, how do I put it? The whole city becomes murder and crime and larceny incorporated? When the public is ignorant and politically ignorant and apathetic, so that then they go, I don't care what the council members do. Or even worse, the public members go, I support that. I don't think members of the public should be able to find out what kind of a zoning application was applied for. I mean, I'm at the point now where I believe there's members of the public in Watsonville that would tell you right to your face, I don't think that people should be able to get documents like that. I'm glad the city's withholding those documents.
Oh my goodness.
That's where we're at now.
That's hard to believe that people would not feel that public information should be made available to the public. Now, initially, Council Member Dutra was out in the dark on all of this. He just got reelected. So what did he have to say about all of this? He agreed with
Marta,
it, apparently.
Marta, did you want to handle that?
Yeah, Dutra actually gave a good fight for the neighborhood. He was concerned. He was disappointed on the process. He expressed that. He also was still perplexed as to why we're doing this for Monterey County. Where he, I think, fell short was when he capitulated to this thesis that was posited by Councilmember Salcedo and of course staff, that council is only allowed to look at this one issue. Everything else you're not allowed to look at. So pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. That's exactly what happened there. And he said, well, I guess we have to do this because this is what the lawyers are saying and this is what Matt Buliach is saying. So they created this artificial construct that you can only look at this. That is not true.
Not true at all. And it's obvious that the attorney has been in on this all along, too.
That's what it appears
the
like.
The city attorney, yeah.
Yeah. Incredible. What can be done now? The city council denied the appeal. What's the next step?
The only other thing to do there is initiate hostile litigation in court.
Yeah. Can you get a temporary restraining order or an injunction of any kind?
Only if that would be part of litigation. You have a hurdle you have to overcome. You would have to get competent legal representation. Yeah. The attorney would have to evaluate the particulars and would have to put together a brief outlining the arguments, and you'd have to convince a judge that the case is likely to prevail on the merits when it finally goes to trial.
Yeah, and you have to prove the burden of harm, too. To get injunction, you have to prove harm. Which wouldn't be hard to do.
That's doable here. But
yes.
The whole thing about some things, you know what? Some land use decisions generate harm, and yet if they follow the legal procedure, you don't have a whole lot of wherewithal to deal with it. You look for procedural defects in order to try and gain any traction on these things.
Yeah, that's true, and it takes a lot of money.
There is the problem.
How are you? What can the public do if I don't know what you're planning to do, but if you did want to take legal action, how could people help you and support you? And what can we do to help in this situation?
Okay, this is how it plays out. That number one, the rot starts at the core, the actual center of power. That's the city council members. You have 4 council members that were part of the voting bloc that, through non-agendized procedures, got the whole thing going to this point.
Yeah.
And so, what you would need is the people who elected those council members there to start looking for a different kind of political leaders. The next thing you do is that people that want to help is that they study this matter and then start becoming more diligent citizens to start looking for that and to start figuring out how you promote virtue in the system. You know what's really needed, what's lacking in Watsonville that's allowing this to happen, is you don't have the equivalent of a citizens league in here. The council meetings don't have anything like a civic league or a League of Women Voters chapter that monitors that, monitors the report back to them, and then that activate the people to start telling their neighbors and to then start contacting the council members to go, hey, you're doing wrong. That's not right. I don't want you doing that. When council members get feedback, they'll respond, and if they don't, ideally, you end up with a challenger that crops up and then goes, you're not doing what you should be doing, and you need to get deposed. But when you look at the environment in Watsonville, you don't have the equivalent of a civic league. Therefore, you don't have individuals monitoring what the government doing, so then there's no corrective vector that manifests itself anywhere. Therefore, the power just keeps accumulating and concentrating to an absolute degree. And as the Watsonville city government officials start inheriting, by default, increasing concentration of power, they become more and more corrupt.
Yeah, because they see that nobody's going to stop them. That's
and I have to
exactly
give Catalina Torres a lot of credit here as the neighborhood leader. Catalina got people who feel so vulnerable and marginalized to go to the city council meeting. These are people who speak Spanish, and they didn't even know they could have a voice in there. Wow. And so this was a victory for this neighborhood in that regard, that these people felt like they actually had a voice. It was unfortunate that they were treated like they were invisible by council members who were so hell-bent on putting this thing through illegally, right? But these people, I felt like what Catalina did for this neighborhood was a miracle. She and her sister-in-law, Aurora, knocked on doors. They got petitions signed. There's hundreds of signatures of petitions that were ignored. And so this was one of the greatest changes I saw in District 1, which is always treated poorly by the city. And so I'm very proud of the work that she did.
Catalina, tell us about your wonderful work, and thank you so much. That's a lot of work, and it's very brave, because I'll bet you hadn't done anything like this before, or have you?
I haven't, to be honest with you. I didn't even know if I could, but the people that I talk to, honestly, they inspire me to make a difference, and they talk about their own situations, because we all have them, but I just didn't know them. I thought you have this situation, and my neighbor talks about it, but while knocking doors, you get to know all these people, and talking to them, they just like, okay, we go with you, we're stand by you,
wonderful,
because we know what it is about. We love where we live. Really, my mom's been here all her life, living in this area, and we feel like this district is being quite left, like it doesn't have a voice, and that's why everybody, the city of Watsonville just bring everything to District 1. And now, like, no, this has to stop. This needs to stop, because we hardworking people. We and we deserve to be safe, as every community, as every district does.
Absolutely.
And that's why when they were talking to me, it's like, please say something, and we'll be with you. And I said, okay, I guess I can do this.
Good
and they
work.
actually made me feel that I have a voice, and it's thanks to them, to my community, and
Yeah.
and I thank them to support me on this, and because we all is a distinct part of this, and that's why we went, going to all the meetings and talking, calmly sometimes, and sometimes not much, because you have to be strong in a way, and you want to make sure that I got the message to the people who think differently, and to see us. That's all we wanted. Just see us, because even though it could be it's a good project, but just turn your face a little bit towards the people that live here, and I feel like people don't think about it. Don't think about how these people is being affected, or how they will be affected when this comes to place, this shelter. So, and we know it. We exactly know it. What's going on in our district, and we worry about our kids, our family. We want to keep them safe, because it's part of like everybody deserves, and we love them as much everybody loves their family. So that's why we're here.
Thank you for your bravery and your hard work, and I would not give up. Because this matters so much, and the fight you fight is the same fight that many other neighborhoods have or will have if they pay attention like you've done. So let's keep going. Have you any thought toward meeting with anybody from the Attorney General's office? The money is the issue. So why not fight to get an audit and point out that this is fraudulent? Have you discussed that?
The answer is this, that there's already at the California state legislature level, you have dissenting state senators and assembly members that have actually been pursuing that. But it's tending to be a partisan divide. The entrenched Democrat majority, they want this unaudited flow of money going out there that's getting absorbed by politically loyal nonprofit organizations that then generate cadres of dedicated voters. And so that it's sort of like, a Franklin Delano Roosevelt Make Work program. It's, in a way, that's sort of like one of its byproduct effects, that the state governing majority goes. Dan Walters points out that there's 24 billion, that's B as in Bravo, billion, $24 billion that has flowed out across this state that has generated unaudited results.
Oh my goodness.
And the dissenting legislatures that have been petitioning to get some type of an accountability have been sidelined by the majority. Therefore, could I or Catalina or Marta convince the majority to introduce auditing? I would say the odds are pretty slim right now.
Yeah. Well, let's put our heads together. We've got a minute and a half. I'm going to think about this, and I'll reach out to all of you. Let's see what we can't do and bring in our listeners. Listeners, you must be inspired by these brave people. So, Catalina, I'm going to give you the floor. Ilyea and Marta Buliach, thank you so much. And please, in the last minute, anything you want to say.
Well, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for having me and for listening. And by listening to me, you're listening to District 1. You're listening to the people I represent, and I appreciate it. And I know everybody could agree or disagree, but when you disagree, just turn your face to the community is facing already and is struggling a lot for quite a long time.
Yeah.
We just want what everybody wants, and I'll repeat it again because we all deserve to be safe and walk in the streets feeling safe. And right now, you may not understand, but we don't.
Yeah.
So that's why we're doing this, and we see that we see the need, but sometimes it always has to be a balance.
Thank you.
Be like real social justice for everyone and not just for a few.
Thank you very much. We are off the air now. I have captured all of your phone numbers, and I'll be in touch with you, and we will continue this. This is a very important action, and I want to thank you all for your time today and your good work in the community. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you.
for giving, I think, creating an outlet for stories like this, because it's not there. So
you.
your
They're
hard
the
work
only
in
news
making
platform
this, yes.